oh God, don't say that. But the truth is, when it comes to boundaries, it is all about your work. 100%. And the other person, their job is not to listen to your boundary. Their job is to live their life. If they don't listen to your boundary, there will be consequences, absolutely. But a boundary is not meant to control another person's behavior. The purpose of a boundary is to help you feel safe and protected in this world. Hello, you gorgeous and sexy creature. Welcome to Practice Intimacy. This is the place to be to learn all about love, sex, and how to have the best relationships you possibly can. My name is Jami Lynn. I am a couples and sexuality therapist in the Austin area. And last week we covered one part of boundaries, the internal boundaries, so the physical and the psychological. If you're interested in checking out that video, you can check out this link here. And today what we're going to be covering is one internal boundary, one external boundary. The reason that I'm grouping these two together is because in the end what they do is they help you to have relationships with others that feel really good on both sides. And just to give you an idea of what we'll talk about, with containing boundary, we're going to be discussing how you can keep from hurting other people. With the executed boundary, we're going to be talking about how you can invite people to behave in ways that feel good to you. And then other times it's a really clear boundary about here's what I'm willing to tolerate, here's what I'm not willing to tolerate, here's what I'm going to do if this continues. So sometimes it's a little bit firmer than an invitation. And then we're going to talk about the biggest mistake that people make when they try and set boundaries, because it happens all the time. So let's get started, okay? Containing boundary. The point of a containing boundary is to help you know your values so that you can be in relationship in a way that actually matches how you want to behave. So let me break that down for you a little bit. All of us, every single human being on this planet, we have ways in which we protect ourselves that might not feel good to other people. And there's a reason for that. If ever you've heard me talk about the protective system and the different stances that we take in order to protect ourselves, then you know that the only purpose of our protective system is to take care of me. Me and me alone. My protectors do not care about my partner. They don't actually care about anyone else. Their one and only job is to make sure that I feel safe in this world, and sometimes they do that in ways that are hurtful to others. So I'm thinking about my system. Used to be that I would act out by yelling if I was really upset, or throwing things if I was really upset, or once I started getting those under control, then just crying at my partner uncontrollably, so like a unbridled self-expression way of being in the world. That is not really helpful. All it does is make my partner feel like a bad person. Nothing good comes out of it. And then I'm thinking about my partner's protective stances. They're typically pulling back, withdrawing, hardcore, disappearing almost, whether that's disappearing into themselves or physically going away. And also like coldness can happen sometimes. Coldness that can turn into meanness or cutting remarks. And none of that is intentionally to hurt the other person. Most of the time, every once in a while, we might be in a little bit of a retaliation place where our partner hurt us and we're doing something to hurt them back so that they know what it feels like, how much pain we're in. But that's not always the case. Most of the time, it's just that we're hurting and we're behaving in unconscious ways that don't feel good to the other person. Understandably, all these things that I'm listing, they're not pleasant to experience. And if you start really becoming more and more self-aware, if you start practicing these different aspects of intimacy, which self-awareness, presence are two big ones, then what you'll find is there are ways in which you're behaving that don't actually match with your values. And you're not doing these particular behaviors because you're choosing it. You're doing it because it is a pattern that has been part of you since you were very young. This is how you learned how to protect yourself. And so I want to invite you to take a moment and just think about ways in which, when you're upset, ways in which you interact with your partner that maybe when you reflect on it, you're like, shit, I shouldn't have done that. That didn't feel good. I know that that was not the best option in that moment. So just take a moment and kind of be curious. And if you would leave comments for me below, I would love that. We can start getting to know each other a little bit. I can get a sense of what's going on in your life. So just reflect on, okay, what are some things I do that I don't necessarily love, but in the moment it feels like that's the only option. And then the next step would be, okay, in what way does this not match up with my value system? So for me, whenever I reflect on previous behavior, it did not match up with my value system because I believe deeply in nonviolence. And I also believe deeply in regulating my nervous system so that I can come to my partner in a way that is going to be helpful to me and them and our relationship. So basically just acting in relationally healthy ways. And so what I was doing before did not match with those values. And what you need to learn to start doing is compassionately stopping yourself. This is the containing boundary. You can picture it if that helps you. You can just see an image that helps remind you. I have a good friend and mentor who has words that she says in her mind. She says to herself, remember who you are. And when she says that, she means I am golden light who's in love with all of the universe and all people, and I'm connected to everyone. And so it's a really easy way for her to remember, like, oh, I don't need to act out in this moment. I am pure love. Everything's okay. I've got this. And that helps her. For me, usually what I do is I will compassionately look at the part of myself that wants to act out, hold myself lovingly. I usually do it with both hands, one hand on my chest, one hand on my stomach, and inwardly I just meet that part and say, like, oh yeah, you really want to do this thing right now because you're hurting so much. I totally get that you're hurting. I'm here. I've got you. And then once it's calmed down a bit, I can approach my partner in a totally different way, one that is going to be more beneficial for both of us. At least ideally. This does not happen every single time. Human, makes mistakes, fumbles around, does our best, and then learns from it and keeps getting better at these things. So think about how you could start applying a containing boundary in your life, helping yourself to not act out in ways that in the end don't feel good to you by remembering your values. So let's talk about the next one. It is hard to do this next one, the executed boundary, until you have the other three really, really locked down and well practiced and integrated into your system. The other three are the physical boundary, helping your body feel safe in the world, the psychological boundary, which protects your mind from energy and information, making it in, that's not true and that's not about you. So basically being able to keep out things that aren't true and things that are judgmental or unkind. Oftentimes it's really hard to do that, so a psychological boundary really helps. And then the last one is the containing boundary. Not acting out when you're upset and instead remembering your values and then coming to your partner from a place that matches with those values. All of that needs to happen before you can go on to the executed boundary, which is setting boundaries with other people. Most of us, we try to go to this step immediately without doing the other work, and then it lands poorly. And we're frustrated because usually what we say is the other person's not listening to my boundary. No, that's not it. It means you have not done all the work to really understand how to set a clear boundary and stick to it. And that might be hard to hear. Even as I'm saying it, there's a little part inside of me that's like, oh God, don't say that. But the truth is, when it comes to boundaries, it is all about your work. 100%. And the other person, their job is not to listen to your boundary. Their job is to live their life. If they don't listen to your boundary, there will be consequences. Absolutely. But a boundary is not meant to control another person's behavior. The purpose of a boundary is to help you feel safe and protected in this world. And only you can do that. That is nobody else's responsibility. At least if you are a fully functioning adult. This is totally different if we're talking about kids. This is totally different if we're talking about somebody who's in a vulnerable position because of mental health or intellectual development issues. But if you are a fully functioning adult, then it is your responsibility to take care of yourself in this world. So let's talk a little bit about the executed boundary. It is the simplest formula in the world, and it's also the number one mistake that I hear people make. So let's talk about the mistake, and then I'll give you the formula. The mistake is often when people say I'm setting a boundary, they're trying to tell the other person, you need to behave this way. That's my boundary. You have to act this way. That is not a boundary. What a boundary is, here's the formula. If you do this, then I'm going to do this. If you speed in the car, then I'm going to start driving myself. If you aren't in the car whenever we're supposed to leave in order to get to the party, then I'm going to go without you. If you yell at me, then I am going to leave the room, maybe even leave the house until it feels calm enough in the house for me to come back. That is an executed boundary. There are steps before you can actually set this boundary. And if you are interested in learning how to do this really, really well and get very clean in setting boundaries, check out my training, Boundaries Create Your Peace. It is a training that I did with a colleague and mentor where we talk about step-by-step processes and we give you practices that you can apply in your life immediately to start really building all 4 of these boundaries. But with the executed boundary, we go through 6 steps to help you really solidify, okay, what boundary am I setting? And the first one and the last one are probably the 2 most important. There's 3 that are very important. I'll go through the 3 that are really important. The first one is clarifying your boundary. What exactly am I trying to do with this boundary? How is it going to protect my energy, my mind, my body, my well-being? And what exactly do I need to do in order to protect that? So that's step 1, clarifying your boundary. And there's different questions you can ask yourself to get really, really clear about what boundary am I trying to set. The other one that's really important is actually step 5, and it is self-soothing. Because when you set a boundary, the likelihood that the person's going to be like, oh my God, thank goodness, thank you for setting a boundary with me, is just about 0. So you need to be able to soothe yourself so that you can do step 6, which is continuing to hold the boundary. Anytime you get pushback from the other person saying, no, my boundary is if you yell at me, then I am going to remove myself for a period of time. And if I come back and you're still yelling, I'm going to remove myself again. And I will continue to do that until we can have a calm conversation. If you're interested in learning the other steps, again, check out this training. It is, man, it's so useful. Being able to do boundary work, I honestly think it is the most important skill that you can learn if you want to be in a good relationship. Boundaries are so essential. And so let's just take a tiny recap. What we talked about today was the containing boundary, boundaries that help protect other people from you and the parts of you that might act out and hurt them. And you do this by knowing your values and living by your values. Next, we talked about the number 1 mistake that people make with boundary setting, and that mistake is attempting to control the other person rather than changing your own behavior to protect yourself. Because the moment that you put it on the other person to change, I'm afraid that you have given away your power, and the likelihood that that boundary will be listened to is extremely low. And then last, we talked about some of the steps you can take to actually setting a clear, executed boundary with another person. How to be clear about what you want, how to soothe yourself when you get pushback, And finally, how to continue to hold firmly to your boundary, because it's important. I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel for more content like this. We will be talking about all things love, relationship, sexuality, which we did not touch on today, but one of my favorite subjects whenever it comes to romantic love. And I will see you in future videos. Bye for now.